That was really excellent, Matt. And I think that I will change what I'll say accordingly. New progressive agendas is what we're here to talk about, and while we could easily resolve that is about a new set of issues, I think Rose is right. It would be the wrong thing for us to do to actually have a conversation about what those issues are, and instead we should be talking about how we're going to get there. And so what I guess I'd really like to focus on is, if we think of what Matt has been saying about coordinated organising and the infrastructure that sits underneath that as the destination of where we need to get to, then I would like to spend some time speaking about the bits of the puzzle that I think are missing in this country. And in doing so, the end point that I want to get to is the conclusion that, in fact, the movement I come from, GetUp, should only ever be a small part. It might sound ironic, but really I believe it should only ever be a small part rather than a large part of what the progressive movement is all about in this country. And so I'd like to get to that conclusion towards the end. First of all, though, it would be remiss of me not to provide some context about the bias at which I come. And so to start off with that, I'd like to read a few self-aggrandising quotes, if you will do me the privilege. And then I'll get to some negative ones as well to paint a picture. But we'll do the positive ones first, because I like winning and I don't like losers either. So I'm with you on that. First of all, I think it's exactly what we need to keep the so-and-sos honest. Their approach to advocating for whatever cause is so creative, unique, and in the end effective, that they really see results. That was, of course, David Koshi-Kosh on the Sunrise program describing the GetUp movement. And this from the Age Online after the last election. If the winner of the election campaign were to be decided by the ads, we'd all be ruled by GetUp. Thankfully, that's not the case. And yet, at the same time, the less self-aggrandising quotes, in fact, the opposite from Eric Abetz, our don't need to say much more. Here's his quote. "A new kind of astroturfing. There is something particularly repugnant about an organisation which pretends to educate young people about policy issues while taking advantage of their political inexperience." Coalition Senator Eric Abetz. And so I have to, of course, ask myself the question, why is it that a movement of 450,000 Australians can elicit such positive and such negative quotes literally within hours of each other? At GetUp, we wear the names of our enemies, our detractors, as badges of honour. And I say that with quite distinctive language, quite considered language, because I think one of the things that we must realise in the progressive movement is that on occasion we will be defined by those who don't stand with us. And we certainly need to be okay about that. And we're able at this movement to be okay about that because we know what we stand for. We know that our issues fit within a basket of values, if you like. We know that we stand for fairness, for sustainability, for care and compassion, and for accountability. And we look at these values when we consider any issue that our members want us to campaign on. And unfortunately, what I think we have seen, I think not over the last few years, but in fact over the last few decades in politics in this country, is that political parties have become scared of negativity, scared of offending anybody. When you stand for something, there'll be others who stand with you, but when you stand in the centre, there's no one passionate there, and so of course there's no one to stand with you. And I say this first rather than talking about technology and online campaigning, as you might expect me to talk about, because it's this culture and these sets of values, this set of values that underpins the success and the growth of the GetUp movement. We see technology as merely a set of tools that can enable us to do in more effective and more efficient ways the kinds of campaigning that really progressives have been doing for decades. Of course, it's important when talking about GetUp to recognise the unique nature of this style of movement. Matt, you briefly mentioned Move On there, and there is quite a difference, even though we use the same online tools, it's actually quite a difference between us and our counterparts in other countries. But one thing is the same, and that is that this style of movement, an open online social movement, is one that certainly couldn't exist without its members. It's very different to think tanks, to political parties in the modern day age, even many NGOs. All of these groups rely, of course, in some way on the people who are either their members or their donors. But at GetUp, we literally couldn't exist. There would be nothing that we could do without the action of our members. And I think this is a fundamental difference that allows us to sit above kind of vested interest, if you like. It's very hard to try and change GetUp's agenda because it is so diverse and driven by such a large group of people. I think this is absolutely critical, and it was one of the things that was in the minds of our founders when they set this movement up in a certain way. So when we think about organisations, for example, let's take Oxfam, I think we've got their climate campaigner here, or Greenpeace and other NGOs, they can run a TV ad, for example, out of their annual budget. And ultimately, it is funded by their members through those membership fees or those weekly and monthly donations that we all get asked to make on the streets these days. But in our movement, there of course are no membership fees. And so we are unable to run that TV ad without the power of the donations of our members. And to make this a little bit more practical, whereas some groups might hire enormous government relations teams and lobbyists to go to Canberra and talk to politicians, the difference here is very obvious. At GetUp, you'll have 18,000 people picking up the phone, having been mobilised online to then take what is, in a sense, an offline action to make some phone calls. Or in the case of our mental health action, 25,000 people who spent their time writing their heart-wrenching personal stories to their politicians. And if we do the mathematics just very briefly on this, if we assume, and we've done some testing of this, so they're not random assumptions, if we assume that the average person spends around 10 minutes taking action with us on a particular activity, for example, writing an email, or a fax or a phone call, whatever it might be, then that's 4,100 hours of time on the mental health action alone. That's 521 days worth of working days, or 1.5 years worth of my time. And I say this because the scale of what we can do in using these new technologies is extraordinary. But the values that sit underneath it are the same values that we have held as a progressive movement for some time. But the question on our mind isn't really about how we simply continue the status quo. The question on our mind is, how do we get to the destination that Matt is talking about or has spoken about? What are the kinds of infrastructure questions that we have to be talking about, thinking about, answering and executing on? Because even though this movement has reached its political height at bringing in about $4.8 million a year from 46,000 people who in the last 12 months donated on 106,000 occasions and in total took 748,000 online and offline actions, even though these numbers sound, to me anyway, extraordinary and impactful, we know that it's nowhere near enough to create long-term, sustaining, progressive change of the type that Rose spoke about when she introduced this conversation. And when we think about progressive infrastructure, we think about it through the lens of through a prism, really, that has four corners. First of all, movement-based politics and the future of the infrastructure that our movements use, that online social movements use. We think about think tanks and their interconnected future. We think about electoral politics and the progressive power we can build here. And we think about building progressive media and progressive opinions within the existing information exchange platforms. And I want to spend just a few minutes going through those four pieces of the puzzle, if you like, that I think are the next steps to get to where many in the US already are. So we're certainly not there with this type of progressive infrastructure.